Okay, this is part 2 uh, of chapter 2, which we were learning earlier. And in this chapter uh, 2, in part 2 section, we will be learning two part. One is stakeholders, and the second part is requirement and design. In the previous section, we learned about the business analysis core concept model and key terms, and we also learned requirement classification schema. So the three sections we covered under business analysis key concept. Now we will be talking about the stakeholders. The stakeholders basically, each task includes a list of stakeholders who are likely to participate in execution of the task, or who will be affected by it. Either you are part of the project, or your system or your process or your role has been affected by the project which has been initiated, project or change. Okay, so that's where you have some stake directly or indirectly in the change. Okay, a stakeholder is can be an individual, or he can be a group, he or she can be. Okay, and they may involve or interact directly or indirectly. The Bebop guide does not mandate that these roles to be filled by any given initiative. Okay, so they could be part of your organizations, and they could be basically, participating in it, right? So here some of the stakeholders we have mentioned here, and there may be more than that what we have mentioned, but this that talks about is a business analyst. While talking about addressing each role, we will also explain what about the role. Okay, and about that stakeholder. For example, the business analyst is also a stakeholder in all business analysis activities. The BEBOC presumes that a business analyst is responsible and accountable for execution of these activities. So you are a direct stakeholder. In some cases, the business analyst may be responsible for performing activities that may fall under another stakeholder's role. So you are helping or supporting the stakeholders, because many times the business stakeholders may be busy with their BAUs. So it is that is what this point is basically referring to. Okay. Now I would like to talk about is basically customer. A customer uses or may use the product or services produced by the enterprise, and may have contractual or moral rights that the enterprise is obliged to meet. Okay, so that could be your customer. He or she may buy your product or services, or there could be some under certain terms and conditions. For example, customer can return the item in certain period of time, or customer can avail the services, and it's like the under that warranty guarantee is that mentioned, right? So that is what we talk about, some a kind of agreement, right? And that is and those kind of the agreement between the customer and enterprise, where the enterprise has to oblige to those agreements, what they are agreeing to. For example, if you buy a laptop and if it is under warranty for 1 year, and if anything goes wrong, then the business is obliged to the enterprise is obliged to basically replace it or maybe fix it within that warranty period. But once the warranty is over, then the enterprise has no obligation to fix it. They may have all the rights to charge. They can fix it, but they may charge for that. Okay, so this is what it is. All right, next we talk about is a domain subject matter expert. Domain subject matter expert is any individual with in-depth knowledge of a topic relevant to a business need or the solution scope. Again, he or she may be also related to a business need, that is a problem area, or could be the opportunity or the solution scope. They may also include, for example, legal expert, and they could be your auditors, or they could be a process manager, something like that. Okay, this role is often filled by people who may be end users or the people who have in-depth knowledge of the solutions, such as manager, process owners, legal staff, consultant, etc. Then comes to your end user. End users are the stakeholders who directly interact with the solution, and end users can include all the participants in the business processes who use the product or solution. So they're familiar with end-to-end processes, different scenarios, exceptions, errors and all. So those are the one who are interacting with the solution on day-to-day basis. Okay, those are your end users. For example, cashier interacting with the the core banking solution. All right, they are end user. Even your customer can be end user when he is basically accessing his or her account. Then you are talking about implementation subject matter expert. These are basically the stakeholders who are specialized in implementing one or more solution components. So they know what are the changes required, what are the how they should facilitate to implement into the operating model. While it is not possible to define a listing of implementation subject matter expert roles that are appropriate for all initiatives, some of the most common roles could be project librarian, who manages the knowledge base or who will save all your project documentations and code and everything, right? And change manager or the project manager. The change manager is the one who will basically manage the change. Okay, and configuration manager could manage the configuration. Okay, and solution architect, developer, database administrator, information architect, usability analyst, trainer, and organizational change consultant. So these are the different subject matter expert. Then comes to your operational support. These are the team basically who are responsible for day-to-day management and maintenance of the system or the product. So they are responsible to define the listing of operational support roles that are basically required for all initiatives. Some of the most common role could be operation analyst, product analyst, help desk, or release manager. These are your operational support. Then comes to your project manager. The project managers are responsible for managing the work required to deliver a solution that meets a business need and for ensuring that the project's objectives are met while balancing the project factors including scope, budget, schedule, resources, quality and risk. So there are various factors or project factors are there. So this is what will be basically handled by project manager. He may be not be responsible completely to define the listing of the project management role that are appropriate for all initiative, but some of the common roles could be project lead, technical lead, product manager, or the team leader. Okay. So this is could be the different, but they depending on the designation, their role also may be slightly changing. Then you have is a regulator. Regulators are responsible for definition and enforcement of standards. Standards can be imposed on the solution by regulators through legislation, corporate governance standard, audit standards, standard defined by organization's center of competencies, and their roles could be even they could be government bodies, regulatory bodies, auditors. Like tax department is a government body, SEBI is a regulatory body, RBI is a regulatory body. Okay, and in USA it is Security and Exchange Commission is again regulatory body. Okay, so you'll have to understand there is a difference between the government and regulatory body. And an auditor, he could be internal or external. Sometimes government can also nominate an auditor to review your processes or activities or something. If you got into trouble with the government, then they can keep a close eye on your processes and practices. Okay. Now next comes to your sponsorer. Now the sponsors are basically responsible for initiating the effort to define a business need and develop the solution that meets the needs. Sponsorer also can basically fund your project. Okay, and they can authorize the work to be performed and control the budget and the scope of the initiative. Alternative roles could be execute and project sponsorer, executive or the project sponsorer. Then comes to a supplier. A supplier is a stakeholder who is outside the boundary of your organization. He or she may be supplying, for example, it could be supplying the consultant, they could be a recruiter, or they could be basically IT service providers. They must, or they could be a product company who are basically selling their product. If you decide to buy the product rather than build, then they could be the one. Okay, so that those are your suppliers or vendors. Okay. Next, in the last is your tester. The testers are basically responsible for determining how to verify that the solution meets the requirement defined by the business analyst, as well as conducting the verification process. Testers also seek to ensure that the solution meets applicable quality standards, and that the risk of defects or the failure is understood and minimized. An alternative role is quality assurance analyst. Okay, so that's your tester. Any question about a stakeholder? If no, so I'll just go to the next level. Next is your requirement and design. In the requirement and design, basically eliciting, analyzing, validating, managing the requirement have consistently been recognized as a key activities of the business analysis. So these are the primary the role the business analyst had to play: elicit the requirement, analyze the requirement, validate them based on their value and the relevance, and manage them during their life cycle. Okay. However, it is important to recognize that the business analysts are also responsible for definition of design at some level in an initiative. The level of responsibility for design varies based on the perspective within which the business analyst is working. Now, this is basically the defining your responsibility for the designing, and now the designs will play a very important part here. The reason is the design will complement your requirement and help the readers to improve their understanding. Okay, and depending on the audience and depending on the situation, they can basically create those design and also get to the level of the details as they feel appropriate. Okay. Next, we talk about the requirements are focused on needs. Designs are focused on the solution. Now here, requirement, when you focus, that will they talk about the what we need, that is what is described, but designs are focused on the solution, means how it should be implemented. Okay, so one is basically need, another is from the implementation of the solution perspective. The distinction between requirement and a design is always not clear, but same technique are used to elicit, model and analyze both. And requirement lead to design, which in turn may drive the discovery and analysis of more requirement, and a shift in the focus is often subtle. What does it they mean? That when you are elaborating a particular requirement and when you try to create a design that that can complement the requirement, then you may discover additional items which you must have not considered at the beginning. It's always we are analytical. When we see few things, then we try to basically come up with the additional details, right? For example, when you see the features 1 2 3 4, then you can basically think about feature 5 or 6, but when you don't see 1 to 4, then you may not see 5 and 6, right? Like that. Now here is basically a small table which talks about the difference between the requirement and how the design can supplement. For example, if your requirement is, this is a wrong slide actually, just let me fix it. Okay, Here we talk about requirement means the requirement is view 6-month date sales data across multiple organizational units in a single view. That's your requirement. So you supplement that with the sketch of a dashboard which will show you the sales data, right, in a single view. Then the requirement could be reduced amount of time required to pick and pack the customer order. So this is basically reviewing the process. So you create a process model. The requirement next could be record and access medical patient's history. Now you can create for this is basically simply a you can create a what we call a dashboard or a web page, okay, or we can call it as a screen mockup showing specific data field. Then you can enter them and basically get the patient's history. Requirement could be develop business strategy, goals and objectives for a new business. You can create a business capability model for that, okay. Requirement could be provide information in English and French for a particular website. So you can create a prototype of that website with a text displayed in English and French. So that's basically design. When you create this prototype or design, that your stakeholder, whoever is going to review them, they will basically see and then provide the additional feedback or the improvement opportunities. And once that happens, it is your quality of your requirement improves drastically, because those changes you don't have to basically take care of at later stage, that is after development or the testing or during implementation or post implementation. So that helps you the entire team to reduce the cost. They always say that when you are basically making a change at the requirement definition time, the change is, if it is x, during the testing it becomes 20x, or it in the implementation it can become 100x, you know. So that's the basically cost. So then the number of requirement goes for into change management, then again we are increasing the cost, and that will ultimately affect on the budget and again timeline. Okay, and in addition to that, it will also affect the stakeholders basically satisfaction level. So all these need to be considered. That's why the design are very important part of your the requirement and the business analysis activities. Okay.